Okay. Sorry, I'll.
Possibly worse.
Bye.
Thanks, Vicky. Gonna help kind of ease it out. What you can try to do, you got some toothpicks here. Get on one end, push down, and you can pull up.
Magali, je masz.
Hello, everybody. Welcome
Hello.
to the Panic and Anxiety webinar. My name is Pietri. I work at the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. We hope you all enjoy this awesome session that we have planned for you today. Dr. Kalinda is a very talented expert of ours. We are so happy for her to be joining with us today. Just before we get started, just some house rules. Please keep your cameras and audios off just for now. We will be having a Q&A session. Then we can either maybe ask questions through the chat box, or if you then can raise your hand and want to ask your questions face to face, that is also okay. But we'll leave that to the end of the session. And then also the session will be recorded. We will send an email out after today, just with the recording of it, so that you can go back and refer to some awesome knowledge that we will be getting today. Just to kind of get us in the mood, I would urge you all just to take this time and kind of take in what we are giving you guys today. I know in the NPO sector, things can get very hectic, very stressful. And yeah, just try and take this hour and a half just for yourselves. Dr. Kalina, as I've said, is an awesome expert, and she's going to be giving us some great tools today. So I urge you to take this time for yourself and yeah, just enjoy. As we get into it, just as an icebreaker, I'd like you all just to reflect on this week. Maybe think of one word that describes this week for you. Reflect, think back, what were your challenges? And in one word, just maybe pop it in the chat box. What do you think this week felt like to you? And yeah, for me, I felt a lot of change this week. So for me, that's my word of the week. It just kind of puts the week in perspective for us. And yeah, if you don't mind, pop it in the chat box. Let's see what's happening there. After that, we will be going into the presentation with Dr. Kalinda, but let's reflect on this week, take a moment for yourselves, and yeah, let's see how it goes. You could also take a deep breath while you're reflecting. Hectic, unpredictable, challenging, busy, tired, yeah, roller coaster. And I think that's such a common theme these days, especially, you know, NPO sectors, and, you know, the pandemic has made things so unpredictable. And I think for me, especially, I love a little bit of predictability, even though we are working in NPOs and things do tend to be a little bit hectic in any way. I think the pandemic has just kind of escalated some of those feelings. Some of the words we're getting: burnt out, content, that's good. Stimulating, stretch, very interesting word. Recovering, that's also good. Exhausting, good. Blessed, great. Growth, and I'm glad to see that we've got some positivity going here, which is always great. And focused. So yeah, as I said, I think I urge you guys to please take this time, take it in for yourselves. And yeah, let me introduce Dr. Kalinda Linda. She has been a part of SADC for quite some time. She's practically practicing clinical psychologist and CBT expert. For those of you who don't know, CBT means cognitive behavioral therapy. Her using this kind of paradigm, she's able to provide rapid solutions for anxiety, panic, sleep, and also things like burnout, stress-related conditions. She's also on the SADC board. And I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Linda for about 2 years now. She's an educator, a mental health advocate, and a keynote speaker. And like I said earlier today, is that we are so fortunate to have her here with us today. And yeah, without further ado, Dr. Linda, if you could come along. There we go.
Great.
Hi, Doctor. Hi.
Just open that up. Great. Thanks so much for putting this together and for asking me to speak as well. And, you know, anything that's to do with SADC or NPOs or NGOs, I'm there. So actually, I shouldn't say that, hey, because I know what's going to happen. So what I'm going to do today is do a little bit of theory, and because I think knowledge is power. And then we're going to do a lot of demonstration and a lot of practical. So I think that's going to be quite fun. And, you know, it's Thursday, so we're not quite Wednesday, we're not quite Friday. So let's see if we can actually be a little bit more alive this afternoon. And thanks everybody for those words in the chat box. I think you're going to see how all of those words are actually going to fit in probably in 2 or 3 slides. Anyway, I'll tell you when we get to those. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen.
To the office to the immigration.
And can I just ask you guys to mute? Okay, great. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yes, thanks, Dr. Linda. Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, let's begin. So mental health 2021 versus 2020, it's not the same thing. You know, it's changed quite a lot. So let's talk a little bit about context. So what is mental wellness and what is it not? Okay. Now, if there were a shop where they were selling 2 hours of mental health for X amount of rand, I think we'd all be there. Or, you know, if you could just kind of have like, okay, now I'm mentally well, I'm good, I'm done, it's finished. Now we know that it doesn't work like that, unfortunately. So mental wellness is this tango between you and everything around you and inside you. So it's a constant dance. So just keep that in mind. From minute to minute, hour by hour, day by day, even moment by moment, you're going to feel different in terms of how you feel physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So we're looking for, say, across a week where you average feeling relatively okay. So if you're having a pajama day, it's not the end of the world. It's when it becomes more than, say, 2 days and it's a pajama week, then we have a problem. Okay, so there's a lot we could say about mental wellness, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about the context of just how this works. So first of all, some of you know me already for talking about the nuts world. So when we say the nuts world, what I'm talking about is the world is novel at the moment. No one alive has been in a pandemic. Even the Spanish flu, you know, that wasn't global like this because we didn't have international travel like we do. So this whole thing is novel. Even the virus has that in its name. Or if you want to be fancy, the novel, but it's actually just a novel virus. Okay, we've never had a thing like this before. Then we have uncertainty. And there are tons and tons of studies over decades that actually show from probably the 1940s to now that the bigger the uncertainty, the bigger the anxiety. So we know that those two go together. And then with that, we have threat. So we don't just have this virus because, I mean, it's invisible, okay? So that's bad enough. But we also have the unpredictability in that virus. Who's going to get it, when you're going to get it, which variant are you going to get, and how's it going to be when you get it? Because young people die, old people are fine. You know, some people are asymptomatic, some feel horrific. So there's another unpredictability that makes the threat bigger. And then we have the bigger threat. So we have a socioeconomic situation going on, and it's global. So, you know, one shift in a country there, and then there's a shift over here. So there's a lot of threat going on at the moment. And so now, if you think about it, it's a nut aspect. I mean, it's enough to be anxious and depressed and stressed about, isn't it? But thank goodness there's an S. And the S is where I'm coming in today. And this is where you come in for many other people. And that is a sense of control. So even if it's a nuts world, we're going to focus on the S, the sense of control. Because the higher the sense of control, the more the anxiety drops, depression drops, stress drops. So we definitely want to work on this thing. And we want to work on this thing realistically. You know, where do I really have the control? And we know if we con ourselves, it doesn't really last. So let's talk a little bit more about context. I'm going to talk about change and your change personality. And something some people know that I say quite a lot is we're not in the same boat. So my boat today, my boat tomorrow is not going to be the same boat. So we're in the same storm. There is no doubt about that. We're all in this insane nuts world storm, yes, but we're different boats. And even if you're a boat who normally is quite strong and resilient and you're giving and you're available to others, even you at times are going to be a little bit leaky and maybe need to go in and be patched up a bit. So please remember that we're all in different boats. And, you know, when you're feeling good, you can maybe look around you and you can help out the boats who aren't doing so well in the storm. And when you feel like you need a bit of help, don't be the hero, because that's often our personalities, people in the helping space. We tend to just give. And we don't understand that even our boat sometimes needs a little bit of a break. So with that in mind, let's finish this off. And just to give a bit more context, we've had a lot of grieving and loss and shock last year. This year we had all the fatigues: COVID fatigue, decision fatigue, Zoom fatigue, everything fatigue. And now there's even a new thing called languishing, where it's kind of that meh feeling, where you're just sort of indifferent, and that's a kind of a version of a depression, but not quite. So it's a version of a fatigue. So a lot of contextual factors. Uncertainty is the new certainty. No wonder we're stressed. No wonder we're anxious. No wonder everybody's burnt out. If you think of any one of these things, it's a problem. Put the whole lot together for almost 2 years now, and I think we start to understand the context. Remembering also that people in NGOs, NPOs, in any kind of helping space, you're doing more heavy lifting because you're built that way, that you kind of go in and you want to help and you want to do. And this is why it's incredibly important to also think about yourself from time to time. Can't give what you don't have, okay? So let's be a little bit selfish for the next hour or so. I know that's a swear word, but we're just going to try. Okay, so it all begins with awareness. So what is your level of awareness? So right now, I want you to think you've been out and about today for a few hours. So do you remember what you had for breakfast? Do you remember if you're at home where you put your keys? Do you remember how many robots were green on your way somewhere? And you're probably thinking, oh, I don't even know how I got home. Okay, so what is your level of outer awareness? It's actually not so great lately. I think it's probably, the whole world has gone a bit ADD. We're all kind of scattered. And wherever you go, there are these billboards and news and things pulling your attention, let alone other drivers on the road. And even when you're walking in a shop, you've got to be aware of things all the time. Now we have social distancing, but are we? Okay, so that's the first one. How aware are we of what's going on? And secondly, what's more important is, what is your inner awareness? How aware are you of physically how well you feel? Emotionally, what's your state? Mentally, what's your thought patterns? Maybe at a spiritual level, where are you at? So we don't have that much inner awareness. And then we get blindsided when we burn out, or when we have a panic attack, or we have a terrible day and we don't know why. It's because of that lack of inner awareness. And I'm going to be covering a lot more of that as we go. Many benefits, because prevention's better than cure, bottom line. I'd far rather know where I put my thing than have to scramble around and look for it. And I'd far rather pick up a small bad mood than let it just kind of expand. And eventually I'm having a bad day, and then I'm having a bad week, and then I'm in a terrible space. So very, very important to have awareness. And so today I'm going to be talking about change. I'm going to be talking about anxiety, the big two, which would be generalized anxiety and panic. And then I'm going to talk about burnout and stress and compassion fatigue. So these are the big ones, and we're going to get through all of these with a whole lot of tips and techniques. So it'll always be in two phases. There'll be the information, so you can have an awareness of where you're at, and then there'll be something practical. What are we going to do with this? Okay, so let's move straight forward. Knowledge is power. So let's begin with change. Now, of course, we've heard about this, but if we think about the cycle of change, it starts with equilibrium. And this, if you look back through your entire life, you have sort of a phase of equilibrium where things are more or less in balance. And then a bomb goes off. It could be a good bomb or a bad bomb, but there's a change. And then there's a bit of chaos for a period of time, and then a bit of disequilibrium while you're finding your feet again. And then there's another equilibrium. So it's supposed to go this way. But as you can see, there's another half that's been happening to us. And in South Africa, we have this all the time. But what's important to note is that even though South Africans are very, very resilient, even we have a limit. And I think that's important, that, okay, we're tough. We all of those things, we're known around the world for how tough we are and for how much change and chaos we can handle. And we just carry on. But even we have a limit. And especially people who are in the caring kind of area of life, you get people who tend to identify more as victims, help me, abusers, we know what that is, and then the rescuers. And anybody who's doing some kind of NGO or NPO or helping, we're down here, the rescuers. So for us, we're always, when there's chaos, disequilibrium, help, 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 help. And we really need to be aware of our situation in terms of what is the chaos in my life. And we saw from those words, I think somebody did say chaos, and it's busy and it's hectic and it's brutal. And sometimes it's even a good thing. You get a promotion, you did this amazing piece of work here, you changed somebody's life, you helped them, but you're in chaos and disequilibrium. And this is the problem. So it's like this constant, never-ending cycle. So what's the implication of that? So whenever there's change, there's going to be grieving. Okay, there's always going to be some kind of loss. So initially, you probably know this, we start with shock denial, then we move to the bargaining, the overthinking, whose fault is this? And then, because there's no one's fault half the time, we get angry. And it's this impotent, stuck anger. And sometimes we displace it onto other people around us because we're angry. Now, if you're normally the caring person and you're suddenly angry, odds are it's because you're feeling that stuck and that overwhelmed and that full of everybody's stuff. And you're now sitting with this impotent anger. What are you going to do with it? And after that comes the sadness, because then we really start to reflect on the loss. And we've had multiple levels of loss. And the world is also in an existential sadness. You know, lockdown's a term you only used to use in prison. Now we all know lockdown. You know, 2/3, actually, no, yeah, I think it was 2/3 of the world's population in April 2020 were in some form of lockdown. And it's probably now between 1/3 and half easily are in some level of lockdown. So we've lost our freedom of movement, of choice, a lot of things. And then, of course, losses of jobs, of lives, not just livelihoods. So there's a lot of that going on. So of course we're having existential sadness. You know, what's it all about? What's the point? And then there never used to be this phase, anxiety, but anxiety is now new. It's not in the DSM yet, but it's in psychological circles now recognized that it's a definite part of change and grieving. And then we have acceptance. So this one we know, we've heard, but what happens when you're stuck in one of those phases? So let's cover that quickly. So the first one is denial, shock denial. And I hear this a lot, that you wake up in the morning and you just, oh, I'm awake. And then it kind of hits you, oh, it's still COVID. That person is still dead. You know, yesterday, a very good friend of mine's husband died, and he was 49, fit, cycled, ran, very, very good person, very kind, very caring. And he's no longer, you know, it was within days, and no history of lungs, asthma, nothing. And that was that, you know. Everybody else in the family cruised, but we don't know why this happened. And so we've been talking, obviously, in the last day or two, and they're all just in denial. One of her kids is in the trick. He's about to start prelims next week, and he's just going into denial. I can't think about what's just happened in my life. I need to do this. Because one of the things his dad said to him was, you have got to just carry on with your life. You know, don't throw away your final exams because I'm not going to be there. Amazing presence to actually say that. And so this boy is using denial, just not thinking about it. And, you know, this is big stuff we're dealing with, but we're all dealing with big stuff like this. So sometimes just, okay, I'm not thinking about it for the next hour. I'm just going to watch rubbish on my phone or TV, or I'm just going to go for a walk. And I'm just not going to think about all the stuff that's on my mind. So denial in small doses is actually very good for you. So then what do we do with bargaining? Now, if you are spiritually inclined, this goes a lot easier. Because if you think about it, who dealt the cards? Well, not you. Here we've got these cards that we're dealing with. I don't know why, but here they are. And well, if you're not spiritually inclined, you still didn't deal these cards. Maybe there isn't a being who deals them. Maybe it's just random. But either way, here you are. And one of the stories that really comes to mind that I've been using a lot, because it's too much, it's too big. I can't make sense of it anymore. I don't know about you guys, but I can't make sense of what's happening in the world. So this story was told by Viktor Frankl, and he was the father of logotherapy. He was in Auschwitz and then in Siberia in the Second World War. And here he was in his early 20s, and much younger guys around him. And the guards Well, they happened to be the guards with the guns. They were the Russian guys, and they were young, between maybe 14 and 18. I mean, think that's young. And here they were. Technically, they were the guards with the guns, and then technically these were the Jewish prisoners, okay? Where were you going to go in Siberia? But anyway, they were walking through the snow, and one of these young guys, the Russians, just lost it. And he just said, why this war? Why? And he started screaming. And he ran up to the line of prisoners, and he just hit somebody with his rifle because he didn't know what to do with himself. And this poor prisoner was lying in the snow with blood all over, saying, well, why me? And the guard said, why anyone? And this is sometimes helpful when you can't make sense, is just to remember this. You know, why did this person who I just explained to you die? He wasn't, I don't know, a criminal or somebody who harmed people or whatever. I don't know why someone like that died. And then maybe that other person who's done a lot of harm doesn't. I don't know. Why him? Why anyone? And sometimes that's really comforting, because that's all that you can actually do, that there isn't really an answer, but accepting that helps you to stop that overthinking and the blame cycle. But of course, we still have our emotions, don't we? So what do you do when you're still sitting with that anger? It's unfair, it's not just, why is it happening? Maybe you're not thinking so much, but now you're in the anger. What are you going to do with that? So a physical release is quite helpful. You know, something like exercise, like going for a brisk walk, running, a few push-ups, believe me, that gets the anger out, okay? Sometimes screaming into your pillow, that helps quite a lot. And then there's a technique, which is especially if there's a lot of it, or if it's triggering old anger. So, or if there's a lot of injustice. So what you do is you take a piece of paper, you make a list of all the people, all the events where you're angry, and you include the good guys, okay, because we're just unreasonable when we're angry, so we put everything on that list. And then you rank them from highest to lowest. And then day one, you pick the lowest and you write an angry letter. But remembering that anger is the inner child, okay? The inner child holds those primitive emotions of anger and attachment. So I want you to not edit. No one's going to see this besides you. So you vomit out this anger, and you be unreasonable, and you blame, and you shout, and you swear, and you do whatever you have to on that piece of paper, longhand. And when you're finished, put it away, just on that one item, okay? You put it away. Later that day, or even the next day, don't go longer than a day, you read it, because now you're in adult mode, and then you acknowledge, yes, this is what I felt. Then you tear it up and you keep the pieces. The next day, you write the next item. The day after that, or later that day, you read it, you tear it up, you keep the pieces. And so you go, and you can skip days in between. You know, maybe when you've done a few, you take a break, then you carry on. And then what you do is at the end, when you've finished, and you've been up that whole list, and it doesn't matter how long it takes you, you then have a funeral for the ashes. So you burn the bits of paper, and you have a funeral. Now, what many people don't know is that all life on Earth is carbon-based. And so when you burn this, you're turning it into pure carbon. And then you sprinkle it somewhere in nature, a park or something. And think about it. You've taken something toxic, because anger is very bad for you health-wise, as well as other ways. And you're taking something toxic little bit by little bit, expelling it, getting rid of it. And at the end, you transmute it into something which can actually be returned to the earth. And then you get yourself just a symbolic reward. It could be just a little personal item, could be a pen, a key ring, photo frame, anything like that. And that thing then reminds you, yes, I got rid of the anger, and this symbolizes that. So it's a very powerful technique, this, for stuck anger. Then sadness. The only thing you can really do with sadness is a brief withdrawal and get support. That's it. So don't wallow in it for longer than a day, and don't deny it and feel bad about it. You're allowed to have a pajama day. So brief withdrawal and support. So I'm hearing that there's certain corporates that are actually more and more giving people just one mental health day per month, where they can just take the day off, no questions asked. And, you know, I don't know that everyone can afford that, but maybe you yourself can do that, where you take off a section of a day, and that's your sadness. And even a pet Watching TV, reading a book, that kind of thing is support and comfort, even if there's not a human there. Anxiety, we're going to talk a little bit more just now about reality testing and just do you. It'll make sense just now. And then acceptance is not resignation. Okay, it's active acceptance, which is, okay, I now solidly internally accept that this is the reality, this is what's happened, this is what's happening, and this is the part I can control, and I accept I can't control the rest. So don't just resign yourself, oh, I have to, because that's going to be sort of anger suppressed. So you want that active acceptance that, okay, I accept. It makes a huge difference. Okay, so the thing about uncertainty and change is this. So we all have a different change personality. And Petri was saying something about, preferring things to be ordered. I also quite like that. And so some people, when there's change, see the risk and the loss in it, and other people see the opportunity. So I really believe in a both and approach. So I am somebody who tends to be risk averse. I really don't like it. And yet, when there have been 1 or 2 times in my life when I did actually take a risk, there was an opportunity and I went for it, it has paid off in spectacular ways. So I've learned over time that actually it's a both and. And so if people are very risk averse and you're just focusing on the loss, I promise you there's a hidden gift, always, always. I've seen that in my own life and I've seen that in many others' lives. There is always a hidden gift somewhere, a hidden opportunity. And for people who are the roller coaster personalities who like the change and the chaos, again, there's no such thing as all or nothing. So sometimes you do need to be a little bit risk averse. So just try and have both of those available to you. And if you are opportunity oriented, sometimes when you get a gut feel that things might not be as they seem, or people around you are saying this, maybe pause and actually listen. And on the other side, maybe look for the opportunity when there is a change or a loss even. Okay, so let's move straight into our anxieties. So the most important one we're going to talk about is generalized anxiety, partly because we all kind of have this right now. So before COVID, the kind of, I suppose across the board, the average numbers were 3 to 8% of people at any given time were in an episode of generalized anxiety, GAD. So I did the math. So 3% is 240 million people. If we're 7.4 billion, I think we're more now. So let's say it's 240 million at least, and that's 3%. So we times it by 3, that's a lot. That's about 8.5 million people, is around about 8%, okay? That was before COVID. Since COVID, I would easily say it's doubled. We know at SADAG the amount of callers first doubled and then even again another 50%. So I'm quite convinced that more people with GAD are having more episodes, and people who didn't have GAD before are having situational GAD. And I'll unpack that in a moment. So we know that GAD itself is early, chronic, and pervasive. So it's just out of control at the moment. And so basically what it is, there's a lot of worry about a whole lot of topics. Most days for 6 months. Well, I think we're 18 months in. We probably all qualify for this by now. Maybe the excessive not, but definitely worry. It's hard to control. So people with clinical GAD cannot control it at all. So maybe you're not quite there, but certainly you're seeing that all around you anyway. And so we've got the worry. And then in addition to that, there's 3 physical symptoms. Okay, the restless, fatigue, brain fog, muscle tension, sleep problem. And these symptoms are starting to cause significant distress or impairment in your functioning. So I think most people who didn't have a clinical disorder did okay, off and on last year. But this year, it's the long haul, the effect of the pandemic. And that's where actually this is coming out more. It's more prevalent, definitely. So this is really how it shows up. You've got the worry, the cognitive symptom. So you're totally preoccupied by these events that could happen, future fear. And it's a vicious cycle. And then on this side is the body symptoms. So it's basically a yellow alert. You're bracing all the time for when's the next thing going to happen. And I think, it's quite interesting how statistics work. I know somebody who's an actuary at Liberty, And he was actually telling me, he showed me the statistics that this particular variant, or this wave, the third wave, there were actually far less deaths than in the second or in the first. And I said to him, are you sure? Because I know everybody's got COVID now, and so many people I know are dying. And he just said it's just where people are dying that's actually more prevalent. And he showed me the numbers. I was horrified. I couldn't believe it. And, so that's quite interesting. So we're worrying a lot and we're bracing a lot. And so objectively, the numbers are less. But why are we in this state? Because we're actually exhausted. That's why. And this is a form of burnout. Okay, so what are we going to do with this? So step one is play the cards you have in hand. So what do we always do? Why? Why me? Why anyone? Why? And so if there is a supreme being dishing out these cards, odds are it knows more than we do. Like a parent knows more than a 2-year-old. Maybe they stopped him running with the scissors. Okay, so if that is the case, I didn't deal the cards. If that doesn't exist, or you're not sure, I still didn't deal the cards, but I've got some. I've got to play them. I'm in the game. I'm alive. I'm here. I've got to play these cards. So this is all about where you're really focusing on where you have the power, which is your response right now. If your response says, I can't deal with this, I need to shut down for an hour. Okay. If your response is, I'm going to freak out now, I need some support. Okay. Where do I get some? So focus here with the cards where you have the power, as opposed to beyond yourself and future, which we can't predict anyway. Not one psychic predicted the pandemic, FYI, not one, just saying. And then what happens with generalized anxiety and worry? So step one is, what can you control, what can't you? Okay, you can't control the past, the future, or other people, no matter how much you try. You can't. You can control you right now at this moment. That's it. Quite liberating, actually. But then every now and then these sneaky thoughts start. And this is when the what ifs have been coming and you didn't realize they were there. So what if this? And then what if that? And what if this? And then it spirals into catastrophizing, panic kind of feeling. And so what we've got to do in those situations is we need to reality test those extreme thoughts. So we need to do the numbers. So one of the classic things at the moment is somebody has a symptom. They feel sick. Oh no, what if? What if it's COVID? No, it can't be, but what if it is? And somebody my age got really sick and somebody else I know died. And so we start to, catastrophize. So when we do the numbers, this gives you a little bit of comfort, okay? Okay, so what did that actuary say? There are less deaths. Well, maybe you don't have them in the room with you. So you just do your own numbers, which is how many times or how many people around me do I know who've gotten sick? Okay, maybe 50. And how many of these people had it bad? Okay, maybe probably about 7 or 8. How many of them ended up in hospital? 5. How many of them died? Maybe 2. Now, and that's a bad case. Often it's no one in hospital and no one died that you know. But we tend to jump there to the worst one. Or the other bad one is where, say you're in a work context and you get an email, we all have to come in for a meeting. And if you're in a catastrophizing phase, it might be, the place is closing down. I'm going to lose my job and it's going to be it. I'm going to be out on the street with nothing. We're all thinking stuff like that, okay? And we do catastrophize, of course we do. Right, so what are the numbers? How many times have we been called to a meeting? Maybe about 20 in the last 18 months, unexpected meetings. And how many times was it bad news? Well, the one time we were told there'd be a salary cut for 3 months, and the other time we were told we were moving buildings, but the others were just kind of other things. Okay, so 2 times it's been bad news. And how many of those times have you been fired or has the place just closed down? No, none. But it's possible, yes, but how many times has it happened? And this is the secret with reality testing and looking for the evidence, the numbers, the evidence for each thought or link. Because with anxiety, what happens is there are maybe a dozen options on the table of what could happen. And anxiety will go to the worst case make you blind for the others and say, this is definitely going to happen. So that's magical thinking, that this is definitely going to happen. So I'm not saying it can't. Of course it can. A worst case is a worst case. Then there's a best case. Then there are all the others in between. And so that's what I'm really saying when we reality test, that this is a possibility, but so are all of these others. They are also possibilities. And then once you've looked at those, you can go, okay, what am I going to do? Then you go back to, these are the cards in hand. What am I going to do to maximize my opportunities here? So this is a lot to take in. I'm just going to show you, this is on my thoughtsfirst.com website, and this is a free download. So this technique I just explained to you is on that website in great detail. Okay, right, that's this technique. So let's talk about how you take a mental break. I don't know about you guys, but you know, I feel this year, probably from about March, I'm more tired than I've probably ever been in my career. And I've done more work and more talks and etc. But mostly things I enjoy, like today. But it's just been holding heavier energy, shall we say. So I found that I have to be very careful. And every now and then, when there's just one or two extra things going on, maybe at home, that's when I sometimes just don't feel like doing that technique around reality testing. I just don't want to think, actually. And this is where the mental break is very helpful. And if you've had a spiral where you're catastrophizing, this mental break will just go chop, and it'll just stop that spiral immediately and give you at least a few minutes relief. And sometimes you can regroup. So let's do these techniques. So let's spell pandemic backwards. Okay, so how are you going to do that in your head? So I've got a C, pandemic. So I'm using the back of my brain, the visual cortex. I've got to hold it there. So that's the spatial, parietal, and the frontal, because I need to hold it and track. The left hemisphere is language, and the right is the way it looks and the 3D of it. So I've hijacked my whole brain in the second by having a mental word that I've got to spell backwards. And if you're having an appalling day, then you spell appalling back. If you're having any kind of day that is horrible, you just think of the word and then you spell that word backwards in your head. I promise you, it just stops like that. Then the next one would be where you use numbers. So you pick any random high number. So let's pick 201, okay? And we're now going to go minus 7, 8, or 9. Those are tricky. So let's go 8. So 201 minus 8. That's already rough. Let's say you got that one. Minus 8. Minus 8. I'm sure you're not thinking anything else right now. And there you go. And then the last one of this is the running commentary. So you just look around the room and you just mentally do a commentary. So there's a table, it's got a vase on it. There's a handbag, it's unzipped at the top. There's a computer bag. Outside there's a window, there's some trees. I see a little bit of pink flowers there, it's starting. There are some curtains, there's a floor. So mentally labeling these things hijacks your whole brain back as well. You're looking, you can see the texture, you're having to think what it's called. So you hijack your whole brain back, and that's 1 minute of running commentary. I promise you it works. Okay, so that's the mental break. And then, of course, remember I said there were physical symptoms too. It's not just the thoughts. So I'm going to demonstrate these 3. So the first one is the flop. And there are many more, but I'm just going to do these for now. So if you had a plastic ruler and you bent it up and then suddenly let it go, it wouldn't just gently go back down, it would go beyond and then this. So what we're going to do is we're going to tense the whole body in a particular way for 30 seconds. It's going to be a long 30, believe me. And then we're going to suddenly flop. So no elegant flops here. And you're going to see within 30 seconds, you're going to, with that tense flop, you're going to feel this deep relaxation. So let's do this one together. So put your hands behind your head, your knees up. And okay, if you're on a chair, and now we're going to tense. So push back with your head, forward with your hands, tense your core. Since I can't see you, you can pull a terrible face. Think about all the things that bug you, frustrate you, worry you. Push, push, push. Keep pushing. And especially remembering to tense your core, push back with your head, forward with your hands. You might start shaking now, that's quite common. And then I'm going to count us down. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Flop. Okay. So I hope there weren't any elegant flops there, because that you won't get the full effect. So that's the flop. And you can do that. It's literally 30 seconds. Do it anywhere. And if you can't sleep, you can do it. Sit on the side of the bed and do it. And you can do maybe 3 of them if you're very tight and very tense. Works very, very well. Then the next one is called diaphragmatic breathing. So diaphragmatic breathing is where you use the diaphragm. You can't really see mine here, but it's here. And you want to use the bottom of your lungs when you're breathing so that you expand that section, which releases a lot of chemicals in your brain. So the top breathing, it's more associated with stress and anxiety and the autonomic nervous system, where the stomach breathing or diaphragm breathing is associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. And so it calms you down and it activates that quickly. So to do this, and obviously you won't do this in public, it's just to teach you, put one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. I'm just going to move this so you can see. Just move it a bit closer. Okay, one in the chest and one in the stomach. Now relax your shoulders and let your stomach stick out. It's actually quite pleasant. Okay, so now I want you to breathe out. So exhale and pull your belly button in. So breathe out. And now you're going to breathe in, blowing up a balloon in your stomach and keeping your chest flat. So breathe in. Shoulders down and out. Slowly in and out. So that's how you do diaphragmatic breathing. And obviously in public, you can't do that. So you can just sit with your hands like this on your stomach. Relax your stomach, relax your shoulders. And now you're going to inflate and deflate a balloon in your stomach like this. Very slowly, especially the exhale. And so I think you can see that when you're doing this, you look very calm, because people tend to look at head and shoulders. You know, they tend not to look at anywhere else on you. So if you're sitting like that and you're just really calm like this, you know, you also come across calmer. So this is very helpful if you're in a very tricky kind of situation, just to go straight into the diaphragmatic breathing. And then there's also a mindfulness exercise I'm going to show you at the end that works incredibly well for this. Okay, so there's the Thoughts First website. So now, what is a panic attack? So a panic attack is basically, you can think of it as the pot boiling over. So imagine that you've had this tension, and maybe it's not anxiety only, but it's just a lot of pressure, okay? So everybody's got a different thing that happens when they have a buildup of that internal pressure. Some people say get stomach symptoms. Some people will maybe get high blood pressure. Some people will get migraines. But if you've got the genetics for anxiety, then you'll be one of the people who gets panic. So imagine that you're cooking and this pot is too hot, and eventually the lid's bubbling on top and it's going like this, but you know, the heat stays on. Eventually that pot boils over and it's spectacular. And what's ironic is the boiling over is actually not dangerous. The problem is that heat that's been too hot, which is stress or GAD, okay? But nonetheless, a panic attack is a very scary thing. So if it happens, it's out of the blue. And what it is, the very first time you have one, there's a misinterpretation of physical sensations. And then you start to develop a fear of these things. Sure, I never want that feeling again. And so where did it happen? It happened in the shop. Okay, I'm never going to the shops again. I'm never going indoors with a crowd of people again. And so it grows. And so that develops avoidance and agoraphobia, and we have this fear of fear cycle. And panic, of course, can also happen with OCD, with social phobia, but that's another whole workshop. This is just an overview. So look at it visually. So it starts here. So your pot is too hot, but you don't know that you're about to boil over. Then there's a random little thing that pops in. It could be the coffee that you had. Maybe it's because you missed the coffee and your blood sugar's low. You maybe get a flight, okay? Maybe even it's good news, something exciting. And so this starts, you start to get this heart rate, you can't breathe, you think you're choking, you're going to die. So if you got these sensations, not knowing what it was, of course you're going to have threat thoughts that this is dangerous, I could die, I'm going to lose it, I'm going to faint. And then thinking threat gives you another one of these, and so it goes. Okay, oops. So this vicious cycle then continues, that the more you feel physical sensations, the more scared you are. Threat means you release adrenaline, you get more symptoms, and so it goes. That's the first panic attack, and eventually it works itself out. But afterwards, you're now sitting in your room thinking, sure, that was a terrible thing that happened. Where was I? What was happening? What caused it? And we blame the situation. And then just thinking about the situation makes you feel threatened. That releases some adrenaline. Then you start to get symptoms. And now just thinking about the situation gives you symptoms. And so there's proof that the situation is bad. Isn't that interesting how our thoughts can actually just set off this whole cycle? And, you know, again, I can't give you, even in an hour, all the treatment for panic, but CBT does work very well. And on Thoughts First, there's a whole download on that. But this is just for you to keep in mind if you or someone's having a panic attack, that it's a pot boiling over. So the feeling is real, but the alarm is false. So even if somebody were testing the alarm and they said, look, we have to set it off, you'd still jump, even though you knew it wasn't a real alarm. And so just keep that in mind with panic. You are accidentally interpreting things as threatening when they're not, the physical sensations or the place, but the feeling is very real. And also remembering that a panic attack, a fight or flight, and your survival instinct are all, there's three names for one reflex. So it's actually your survival instinct that's accidentally being triggered, but we call it fight or flight or panic as well. Now think about it. If your survival instinct could kill you, that would be a bit of a design error, wouldn't it? So it cannot kill you, but you will feel like you're going to die, but it can't. And also remembering that cycle I showed you earlier, each of those adrenaline spurts has a 2 to 4 minute life. So if you can be distracted for 2 to 4 minutes, you can get a bit more control. And so sometimes it feels like you had a panic attack for an hour, but it wasn't. It was 2 to 4 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes, 2 to 4 minutes. So every 2 to 4 minutes, you've got an opportunity to get out of that cycle. So keep that in mind. And then if you're speaking to someone who's having a panic attack, keep them moving. So if they're driving, if they're out, you keep them there, but you just slow it down. I'm here with you, we can do this. Or if you yourself are having it and you feel this fight or flight, move it out if you can, walk if you can. Keep moving, even if it's slow. Remembering that your survival instinct cannot kill you. You're going to feel horrendous, but it can't kill you. And finally, remembering you learned it, so you can unlearn it. Very important. Okay, and that's what it looks like on Thoughts First, the download. You can also use mindfulness. So there are a few tools on here on practicalmindfulness.coza. And it works very well for depression as well as anxiety as well as stress. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the stress equation. Okay. So you can think of stress as a relationship between demands and resources. So what are demands and what are resources? We're going to go into those in a moment. But let's first talk about this relationship between the two. So when your demands are bigger than your resources, then of course you're going to be stressed. That's pretty much the definition of stress. And when it's the other way around, not all day, but from time to time, you lose an unexpected demand and it's great, or you gain an unexpected resource, also great. When that happens, great, we're in optimal. but mostly we're having a more or less a break even, and that's a realistic way to look at it. So let's unpack this. So distress is the bad stuff. So acute distress is when an obvious bad thing happens to you. And what's interesting is we can get a lot of support when a big bad stress happens because it's acute. And so people can see that this thing has happened to us. So that's the easy part. But when we have chronic or hassles, often you get to the end of the day and you think, well, no big acute stress happened to me today. So why am I feeling so awful? And maybe it's because you had a lot of little hassles just constantly jabbing at you like that. And the analogy I always use is if you had one big monstrous person and they punched you in the stomach once and everybody around you saw this, they could support you and you'd have one big thing and you could then start the recovery. But the hassles are like a little person that big or a mosquito sort of stabbing you constantly, you know, or a little person that big jabbing you constantly with a little pin. It's not as big as that acute thing, but it's that little niggle. And I promise you the hassles from a health perspective are worse for you than the acute stresses. So there's a lot of research on that. Now, chronic stress. So those are things we live with without thinking about it. So that's the nuts world. We're living with that. It's potholes. It's, you know, things like that. They're not acute, but they're chronic. They're just there the whole time. Things that we have to deal with. Load shedding, Wi-Fi, things like that. So that's the chronic. And then finally, there's the eustress, which is the good stuff. So, you know, you say being single for a long time, you meet somebody, oh, it's so nice. And then after a week or two, oh, why haven't they called me back? Why have they blue ticked me? Why are they this? And then, so there's some stress attached to the good stuff. Or you get a promotion. Now suddenly you're responsible for all these things. So stuff like that. So good stress also, you pay a price. Then the resources on the other side. So you get outer and inner, and you get fake and you get real. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those as we go. So the best way to think about fake and real is, did you really feel better, sustained better after this resource or not really? So say you go for a massage and the person spends an hour just talking about their own stuff. You're not going to feel so great, okay? So that was a fake one. Or say you're starving and you just chug some coffee or a Red Bull. You'll feel great for half an hour and then worse. So that was a fake resource, okay? An inner resource would be something like your sense of humor or your health, and an outer resource would be social support. I'm going to talk about those. So let's talk about these. So the first of these is emotional. So emotional support is basically where you've got a safe place to vent, okay? Somebody who's just going to listen, who's not going to judge, not going to force advice on you. Then the other one is instrumental or practical. I don't know if you can see it on the slide. It could be behind the things. So it's practical. It's basically somebody's going to physically help you. So let's say a pre-COVID example, maybe you're moving house. The emotional person is the one where you can say, oh, I'm so sad, I'm going to miss this place, or the movers broke this, or they came late, or oh, so much I have to unpack. That's the emotional one, and you can vent. Did I do the right thing? Where the practical one will just come to your house, bring you tea, unpack your stuff, hang your curtains. So they're different kinds of support. Then the next one is esteem. And that is where even when you do something stupid or wrong, the esteem person makes you feel like you're at least still worth something. Okay. The information, we normally go for Dr. Google, but try and get at least one other human to ask if you can. So always try and have 3 sources of information before you make a big decision. And then the last one is companionship. And that can be a plant, a pet, a book, a stranger. So the most important things are, where do you give and where do you take in terms of the support? Very, very important. So typically when we're in a helping role, we give and we feel like we're taking. We don't know how to receive graciously. So we need to learn, how do we actually receive? And then spend or save. So when your ship is not feeling so great, you might need to save some energy, and you might not be in a position to be actually giving that support at that time. Okay, and there is a free guide on Thoughts First. Right, stress. So let's just finish this off. So prevention is definitely better than cure. And that's why one of the most important things is to be aware of your early warning signs. So let's go through these. These are the 4 categories: physical, behavioral, emotional, cognitive. And I'm going to just unpack each one. So make this personal. And if somebody knows you very well, maybe they can even see signs you don't see. So all of us, when we are feeling stressed, before we have burnout, before we have any symptoms that are spectacular, we all start with these ones. So physical usually is where it begins. So the skin is the biggest organ. So funny rashes or itches or spots that you don't normally get, that's a dead giveaway. Things like allergies that are more than you normally have. Gastrointestinal, suddenly you can't eat that rich food, you can't have that sugar, suddenly you're getting weird stomachy symptoms. Headaches, not just your normal ones, but when they're more intense or more frequent. And then, of course, more muscle pain than usual. We've all got a little pattern like that we get. So I get funny skin things. I mean, at 53, I should really not be getting spots, should I? But I do get a few every now and then. And it's when I'm pushing it too much, and funny rashes. So you will find you will have one of those. Just look for it. Then the other big one is the behavioral. Good old comfort, okay? Nothing wrong, like I said, with a pajama day earlier or a comfort day. But when a comfort day becomes every day, you're just having that extra drink or chocolate or whatever it is, or anything, any kind of comfort behavior, you're just staying in bed longer, you're just watching something for longer. Any of those comforty things are usually to do with avoidance of something. And you just want to watch that it's within a decent limit. And then some people behaviorally will start to act out, even if they don't normally. They suddenly start shouting and throwing things. And then you also know, okay, this is one of my signs. Then emotional. The clue there is that you're not doing your usual style. So if you're normally chatty and chirpy and good morning, and you just go very quiet, and it's been 2 to 7 days of where you're just withdrawing, then that is quite important to note that, hang on, what's happening? Or if you're suddenly very weepy, very emotional, you crying in movies in places you wouldn't normally, and you see there's a pattern of there's a dominant emotion that isn't normally me. Or you normally very quiet and suddenly you just talking and vomiting out things and maybe angry. So look out for that. And then finally, the cognitive. So we need to be very aware of our inner workings. So the cognitive is when you start thinking thoughts that are escape thoughts. So I've heard very fascinating things over the years. I've heard from a lot of people when they start having songs playing in their head with themes of escape or nostalgic kind of songs that they remember from when they were young and carefree. And that's happening too much. That's often a signal that cognitively I'm wanting to go there. Or the other thing that happens often, especially for people in the caring positions, is the self, as in, come on, you're okay, you must do it, or if not you, then who, which is fine when you have capacity. But that's the tricky bit. You just got to make sure that you have capacity. So look out for those early warning signs. That's probably the most important thing about stress. Okay, just a couple more points. So depression versus burnout. So I'm not going to talk about depression today. We focus more on anxiety and stress and burnout. So depression and burnout both have fatigue, and they both have cognitive effects like a brain fog. The difference is with depression, every day is bad. Where with burnout, the weekend, you're very happy and excited, and the grandchildren or the pets, you're happy to see them. When the weekend doesn't matter and you don't care about grandchildren or pets, then you know it's probably depression. So that's something a psychiatrist once taught me, and I quite like that key difference. Okay, compassion fatigue is a special kind of burnout that happens to caregivers, rescuers, over-responsible. I'm guilty of all of those. So stage 1 and 3 happen to men and women, but stage 2 tends to happen more to women. So stage 1 is that emotional exhaustion. So you take a bit of time off, but you just can't recover. You just haven't got that spark. You haven't got that capacity. And eventually you get to stage 3 where you're just cynical and you don't even see people as people. You just don't care. Now, that is more common than we think. And we try and not feel like that could happen to us, but it does. And in the middle of that stage too, women tend to get stuck in a self-doubt phase. What's the point? Work doesn't help anybody. I'm just helping one, but there's so many others who I haven't helped. And that tends to be much more women. So men go from exhaustion to cynical, and women stop off on the self-doubt, beat ourselves up a bit first, and then we get to the cynical. So just keep in mind that's what happens with that kind of burnout. So caring for the carer. This is the self-care continuum. So on the one extreme, it's all about me, and we know everybody's a narcissist these days. Well, that's them. And then on the other end is others matter more, and that's a different mindset. It's more compassionate, and that's more giving, helping personality. But of course, you've got to look for the middle ground, because why? You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't give what you don't have. So self-care is motivated by a wish to develop a capacity to be able to help others. So in the middle, it's saying, because others matter so very, very much, I will spend a little bit of time doing self-care. The narcissist couldn't care. But over here, self-neglect is actually not going to help anybody. It's not sustainable. So just keep that in mind, that you cannot pour from an empty cup or give what you don't have. So the mental health conversation. So we all are each other's buddies at the moment. So if you pick up that somebody around you is not feeling good, or even if that's you, okay? But let's say it's somebody else. You pick the right time and place. So, you wait until there's something where you can have the conversation privately. And you ask and you say, can I chat to you about something? And then you just say what you see. You can have your evidence, in that meeting you said this and that, and over there you looked like that, you looked really, really tired, and you still look not yourself. You can do that if you want as your backup. But sometimes just 2 sentences, as in, you don't seem like yourself. You seem a bit not the you I'm used to. And then, shh, and then we just listen. And sometimes just saying that and giving the space, the person will actually open up more often than not. And even if they don't, the fact that you said it and then you move on, you just move away. If they say, no, I'm fine. Okay, I was just worried because you seem not quite yourself the last week or 2 in meetings. Put a little bit of evidence and then you leave it and you move on. If they are going to share, you know that you're going to be the one they're going to share with. So that's it. Nothing fancy. You don't have to diagnose, nothing like that. You just say what you see. And if it's yourself and you want to ask for help, again, you pick the time and place and you say, can I chat to you about something? And then you just say just some basic stuff, as in, I just don't feel right anymore. Have you noticed something? And the person will say yes, or they'll say no. Maybe they ask you, what do you mean? And in the conversation, in the telling often, that is where it's very, very powerful, where sometimes you start to put things together, as in, no wonder I feel like this. Okay, so that's that one. So please remember, we're in the same storm, but in different boats. So look after your boat. And finally, I want to teach you a quick meditation, and then I'll open it for Q&A. So the clouds are not the sky. That's what this meditation is about. And this is a generic one that anyone can use. So if you watch this, I'm just going to play this, and you're looking at the clouds. You just watch them for a little bit, and you can see some are faster moving, some are slower, and they're certainly changing shape all the time, aren't they? Okay. And eventually, as we know, in South Africa, we can have a crazy sky full of clouds or sun clouds, and suddenly there'll be a big storm, and suddenly it'll be gone. And the next day there's a blue sky like nothing happened. So as we're watching these, there's 3 things to keep in mind about the clouds. In other words, all weather. Transient, they keep changing. Impermanent, as in they'll cease completely at some stage. And then thirdly, a bit of a mouthful, they're arising and dissolving, like all weather. Think of a rainbow, arising, dissolving, moment by moment in the space of the what? Of the sky. So I'm going to play it again, and this time I'm going to ask you to look at the sky. So look beyond the clouds And you'll notice that the sky is actually doing nothing. It's just a big space. So it's a vast, clear, empty space, quite peaceful, just being there. Okay. So where am I going with this analogy? So basically, the sky, the vast, clear, empty space, is the true nature of your mind. And the clouds are the true nature of your mental activity. That's quite interesting when you think about it. So whether we have clouds or storms or rainbows, there's all this action, thoughts and feelings, past, future, random bits of thing, pleasant, not pleasant. So it's never ending. So often people think that when you meditate, you're supposed to have a blank mind. Well, firstly, you can't stop thought. And secondly, what on earth are you going to do with a blank mind? It's a bit pointless. So this is not the object. The object is to learn to observe without getting hooked in. And, you know, when you finish doing that, then there's another time. So there's a time for observing and there's a time for problem solving. But when you're feeling overwhelmed, this is incredibly helpful. So I'm going to teach you this meditation now about how you learn how to just watch. And so remember, the content of what's appearing, the inner weather, thoughts and feelings, doesn't matter at this moment. You'll get to it later. What matters now is to watch this process, that what comes must go, comes must go. And then you get distracted and suddenly it's gone. And another thing comes and goes, whether it's good, bad, or neutral, random. So let's do this. So find a position where your back is straight but not tense. Hands and feet in a nice stable posture. And gently close your eyes and relax. Take a moment to ground yourself. Become aware of the seat you're on, the ground under your feet. And then you can also invite your mind or consciousness inside. Because the mind is a busy thing. So even if your body is sitting still, probably the mind is wandering about. So invite your mind in, and in fact, let your consciousness drop from the head to the heart center, where you would touch in the center of your chest if you were pointing to yourself. And now we spend a few moments on the breath. So breathing in and out, breathing naturally through your nose. And just paying attention to the feeling of the breath. Coming in and going out. And now imagine that you're looking up at a big blue sky. And it's one of those days when the sky is clear, stretches for miles. And as you're looking up at that sky, you can see that it's a vast, clear, empty space. Vast, vast. We're actually hanging in space. So it's blue-colored space. And if you watch that sky for a long time, or you watched time-lapse weather, you would see that many things appear and disappear in that space. Clouds, storms, rainbows, sunrise, sunset. And all those things would be transient and impermanent, and in fact arising and dissolving moment by moment within the space of the sky. Sometimes there'd be a lot, sometimes there'd be a little. Sometimes it would even be so small it would be invisible. And so we can remember that the true nature of my mind is a vast, clear, peaceful, empty space. And within that mind is all the inner weather, the mental activity of thoughts and feelings. And so now we turn our attention inward, and without following, judging, thinking about, we simply observe the process of things arising and dissolving. So the content doesn't matter. We're just observing the process of things arising, dissolving, moment by moment. And any time that you get distracted by something external or by following something, thinking about it, immediately drop it. Remind yourself, don't follow, just watch. Just see this process of things arising, dissolving, moment by moment, within the space of my mind. And eventually the mind becomes very peaceful because it doesn't matter if there's a lot or a little or nothing arising. Point is simply to observe. Don't follow, just watch. And allow the mind to become relaxed and peaceful. In a few moments, we'll begin to emerge from the meditation. So now you can relax your concentration. When you're ready, gently open your eyes. Okay. I'm sure everybody's nice and chilled right now, but I'll be around to answer any questions people have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalinda. I definitely feel like I've just been on an island breakaway for about 2 weeks.
Good, good. It's my go-to meditation. It works like a bomb.
So good. So if anyone has a question, pop it in the chat box, or if you want some face-to-face interaction, please raise your hand, put your cameras on, and ask Dr. Linda if she's got a question. Dr. Linda, just from our side, we've got a great comment for you, just a compliment to you from Nazima, who says that your presentation was absolutely amazing and she's looking forward to having some seeing some presentations from you in the future. Just on the meditation note, just on the meditation notes, Dr. Linda, how important is self-care and taking that time for self and being intentional with self-care? How important is that in combating things like anxiety and burnout? And then what kind of online resources are there that we could maybe take on just to kind of improve ourselves in that regard?
Okay, so when it comes to self-care, it starts by thinking, maybe if you're somebody who's other oriented, you're very much a giver. So first of all, it starts with receiving graciously. So on that social support slide where I was talking about give and take, this is the problem, that we don't know how to receive, firstly. So think about if you give a gift to somebody and they say, oh, no, you have it, you need it more, Shane, you take it. How do you feel? Terrible. Terrible. I would be so distraught if somebody chucked a gift back at me like that. Now, what do we think we're doing? Just saying, when somebody says, I'll do this for you, you take a break. No, I can do it. I can do it. So self-care is not this big fancy thing. It's actually just being normal, at times allowing people to help you. Then, of course, and so that's receiving graciously, because when you receive, you're actually giving, because we know how nice we feel when we give. So you're actually helping the other person to feel good. So we have to learn how to receive graciously. That's the first. Then, of course, the big swear word. So how do we actually ask? Because we're not used to that, because we're the ones who give and we just anticipate what do people want and need. And so we have to learn how to ask. And how often I work a lot with working mothers. I mean, I'm a working mom myself. My twins are now big, but still. Often I would, feel terrible, and eventually I'd ask somebody, look, I'm really stuck. Can you please help with this lift or whatever? Yeah, of course. I live in the same road. Of course I'll drop your child. And then you think, you idiot, why didn't you ask? Okay. So this is the second part. The third part, nature. Nature is very, very helpful. Even just if it's a little patch of nature in a park. So if we can have nature 3-4 times a week, even for a few minutes, that's very, very helpful. Okay. And then of course the big ones, sleep. Are you drinking enough water? Those things. So it's nothing fancy. And then if we can put meditation into that, even if it's just on the breath, that's actually something you can do as well. So there's lots I can go on about, but I think those are the main ones.
Yeah, I think that's also, and I think just for us, I mean, working at SADAG, I mean, I'm nowhere near been working here for so long. I think for me, especially, it's been about being intentional about it. And you have to, sometimes you just have to learn how to say no. And you, like you say, you have to learn how to sometimes just ask for help, because we perceive it as being a big thing. And I think we build it up in our heads as being a big thing, but it's actually not. And that's the way we get to help ourselves. There is a question. Let me just quickly look here.
And I
so
see a hand up as well.
Yes, I'm going to go to, let me see. Daneo has asked, when doing a reality test, how do you pick a thought to work on, and how do you avoid it? How do you avoid spiraling into a process of negative thinking?
Okay, so please go to my website, Thoughts First, and on it, that very first one that I showed you, that's got the technique in it. It's called the 1, 2, 3 technique. So I can just really summarize it here. So all thoughts have 3 building blocks. The number 1s are things we can control, me now. The number 2s are things we can't control, past, future, other people. And the number 3s are those extremes, the all or nothing, that magical thinking. So that is all detailed in that download. It's called Anxiety and Worry Tips, and it's got those hands worrying. So, you know, it's going to take too long to go into all the detail now. But basically what you would do is you would pick a time of day. So you'd pick a time, say 4 o'clock, and you allocate 15, 20 minutes. That's it. And that's your worry time. So in that time, you're allowed to worry, and no other time. And a lot of people say, no ways, my worry won't respect that. Well, you'd be surprised. So if it's 6 o'clock and the worry pops up again, you could say, come back tomorrow and I'll see you at 4. And 9 out of 10 times, the worry will actually respond, believe it or not. Okay. So very, very important that you kind of stick the worry in a time. When you get there, you take a piece of paper and you write out the worries. And you only write out one at a time. So you pick the big one, whatever's most on your mind, and you write it out. And you write it out as you think it. I'm so worried. What's going to happen when I see that person? What's going to happen when we have that conversation? What if she, what if he, what if it's the end of the friendship, whatever. And then you use the 1, 2, 3 technique. So you scratch out the 2s, and then you reality test the 3s, and you work on the 1s. So that is all detailed in that download. So please go and get that one. I don't want to rush it. So we can always do another talk later on specifically that.
All right, perfect. So if anyone's just wanting, that's thoughtsfirst.com. Dr. Linda's got a great resource there for anyone who's needing some extra help and just some downloadable resources. It's a really, really an awesome kind of resource to have. Then I see the lady or the person that's raised their hand. I'm going to slaughter this name. It's Bahia. Did you want to ask a question? Do you want to put your camera on? Is there anything that you're wanting to ask Dr. Linda?
Hi, Dr. Linda. Hope you're well. Thank you. I first want to say thank you very much for this. As a NPO organization with young adults with special needs, I find it sometimes that I do so much without realizing that I must have me time and things, and that is something I find very difficult with, and especially when you do now this little session with us of the breathing and all of that, it felt like I'm moving to another sort of level, which was actually amazing, not realizing that all my energy, everything, I put so much to them that I actually forget about my own energy. And that is something I find sometimes very difficult to handle with. It's like, because I have to do things, I have to just do, and then I don't think about myself. And like you said, the switching off, I think that's my hardest part ever, because even being in bed, my mind is still working overtime. How do I get to control that, basically?
Okay. I think there are probably a lot of people nodding right now. So thanks for that question. Because
Pleasure.
yes, we are
I'm putting
all,
off my camera again.
okay. I think we're all guilty of that one. Hey. So first of all, if you are working somewhere where there are people around you who you're trying to inspire, we all know this. If you've got kids, you know this. People or kids do what we do, not what we say. So we'll be doing bad things, and then we'll say, no, you're not allowed to do them. And they'll say, but you are. And so if you are modeling not self-care, that's a bad thing, isn't it? So if you're saying to everybody else, now you have self-care, you take time out, you do this, but you're actually not, and you're just running, people are going to do what you do, not what you say. We know this. Hey, that's the first one. Secondly, think about a phone, think about a computer, think about a car. So it goes into hibernation, doesn't it? So if we've all got phones. So if you put your phone down for longer than a few seconds, what happens to the screen? It hibernates. What happens to the computer? A screensaver thing comes on. What happens to your car when you're at the red light? The car idles. We've all been in cars, we know this. What happens in nature? There are day things and there are night things. So cats sleep all day and then they cause havoc at night. Dogs are the other way around. So certain flowers open in the day and some open at night. So why is nature doing all of that stuff? And even technology is doing all of that stuff, but not us. So we need to keep that in mind, that there's a natural order of things, which is there's a time to work, there's a time to rest, there's a time to play. And even work, there's work, and then there's the work in your home or as a parent or a partner or something. So it's work, formal work, other work, like in the home and relationships, rest and play. And that's another whole workshop, which I'd be very happy to do. So this is a balance that we need to get. So self-care is where we first acknowledge that we need to do this. It's not selfish, because the more resourced I am, the more I can give to others. That's the point. Secondly, how do you do it? So there's the work, rest, play balance. And then also modeling, because you're giving to others. When you demonstrate self-care, it's easier than just saying it with the mouth. And I see there's a question right now, guilty for resting even when it's needed. Now, did no one watch that in my presentation? Have you forgotten that thing about the boats? So if your boat's engine is, doing this because it needs to rest, if you were driving in your car and smoke started coming out of the front, what would you do? Or if that light kept coming on saying oil, 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 if you don't fix it, it's going to seize and then your car is not going to work. If you get a flat tire and you just keep going, eventually that rim is going to come off your car. So everywhere around us, things take a break. And so when you pick up your early warning signs of stress, you have got to take preventive action. Prevention is better than cure. We all know this. And isn't that often what happens to us? We look back and we think, oh, why didn't I take action sooner? So self-care is prevention. Burnout, depression, health problems, that's the cure. It's much more expensive in terms of time, energy, money, and pain. So do the prevention, and then you're also more functional for everybody else. Okay, long answer.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Lina. Then I've got Rod, who's a beloved SADAG volunteer. He says, I've seen the use of blowing into a paper bag when someone has been panicky. Is this much the same as doing controlled breathing? Is it something that works?
It does work, and it's something that comes probably from the 60s and 70s. You know why it works is, and this is now, sure, I haven't got enough time to explain it thoroughly, but anyway, I'll quickly try. So what happens in a panic attack is you're going like this. So you're breathing shallow, like. So eventually your carbon dioxide oxygen mix has gone out. So when you breathe into a paper bag or you do controlled breathing, you're just resetting the balance between the oxygen and the CO2. That's really all it is. So from a CBT perspective, we would desensitize, we do all sorts of other things with panic, but the bag works and the controlled breathing works, and so does distraction.
Awesome.
Hope
Thank
that
you so
makes sense.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Rod and Dr. Linda. Okay, Dr. Linda, I'm going to pose one last question, if that's okay. We don't want to keep you here for too long. Eddie has asked, how does trauma play into us dealing with ongoing stress and feelings of feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. So, I think trauma used to be something that was only acute. And that's, again, another discussion. So you have acute trauma and then you have this chronic trauma. And we're dealing with both, actually. So this is the problem. So that cycle I did right at the beginning, which is equilibrium and then chaos, disequilibrium, equilibrium. We're having constant chaos and disequilibrium. And so if we can just make sure that we keep an eye. So I would take stock once a week and just take stock on where am I in those phases of grieving. Have I had a lot of one of those this week? Am I stuck in one? And then you've got to take action. And when a trauma happens initially, there's a lot of research around this, that the reason why we want to talk about it again and again is because the brain initially stores it in order of horribleness, shall we say. So say if you were in an armed robbery, it'll be, there was a gunshot and then somebody ran at me and then somebody came through the door with a gun and then they took this and then they did that. Okay, so any kind of trauma, or like a car accident, there was this loud bang and then everything was quiet. And then I was approaching the light and then I saw something coming fast. You can see it's all higgledy-piggledy. So in the telling, and this is what debriefing really is, when you tell it from beginning to end, you actually are putting it in chronological order, and that's going to make it easier for the brain to store it. So for the first month after a trauma has happened, you're going to have all the stress symptoms. The body, the emotions are going to be all over the place. You won't be able to sleep. Your appetite will be weird. You'll have brain fog. You'll be emotionally all over the place. So for 1 month after trauma, that's normal. Okay, that's completely normal. You're allowed to just be crazy person. But in that time, make sure that you talk it through from beginning. This happened, then that happened. I felt this, I saw this, I smelt that. And if you can do that many times, the brain will archive it and then kind of put it somewhere and you'll be able to carry on. But if after a month it's nowhere better, then you've definitely got to seek some help. So how does trauma harm us? Well, obviously those effects I just said, that it's something shocking that you didn't think you'd have to go through. And I think one of them is off-time deaths. So, if somebody's 98 and they die and they were sick, I kind of get that. But if somebody's like my friend's husband, 49, healthy, decent person, I don't get that. So when it's off time, the shock waves will actually ripple for much longer. The disequilibrium goes on for longer. And especially if you have an uncertainty, you don't know if that trauma can happen again. And this is why crime and now COVID are so scary, because they can happen anytime. It can happen to you today and again tomorrow. So you don't know. And that's that uncertainty. So we need like double, quadruple the amount of self-care. Because if you think we're taking strain, I don't want to know how other people are coping. So, we really need to amp up the self-care. This is not the time to neglect it. Because if, I say this to my clients who are doctors in ER and stuff, that they always say, well, I could save somebody's life. And I say, yeah, but you could kill a few along the way because you're so exhausted, you miss an obvious thing. And then they say, yeah, that's true. So, sometimes you do need to just take that step out, regroup, and then get back in. Very important.
That's 100%. And that's something that we also try and preach, is that you can't pour from an empty cup, just like you told us today. It's something that we like to preach, if I could put it that way. It's definitely, you need to take the time to fill your cup. But on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Linda, for joining us today and for taking the time. Your presentations are always so relatable, so informative. And we are so thankful for you to be taking the time and doing this for us. We so appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, I think in the same way, and all of you now going to get a lesson in receiving graciously, which is thank you. I graciously receive that. And in addition, I graciously thank all of the people who are here today. So firstly, you took the time, you did some self-care. Excellent. And secondly, please don't just forget this. You're going to get a recording. So please don't forget it. I want everybody to once a day do at least 20 minutes of self-care. So please do that for yourself, and I promise you, you're going to be more effective. And I'm not joking when I said I'm very happy to come back in a few weeks or whenever to do a work, life, play, balance workshop. We can definitely do that, and then I'll give you the tips around that.
Well, definitely we'll be elated to have you back. Thank you so much, Dr. Linda.
Pleasure. Be well, everyone.
Thanks, Dr. Linda. So just,
Bye.
just for the rest of us, please have a look at the NPOwer website. There are some really, really awesome, helpful tools on there. I will copy and paste the link to the website in the chat box. Also, if you guys are needing any kind of mental health support for yourself, for your organization, please call 0800 515 515. Again, if you visit the website, there are some awesome resources there, handouts, all the past webinars that we've done before. We've really taken some time to help you guys with any kind of resources that you need. And then on another note, for us, it's important to learn more about how the NPO sector and leaders, staff and volunteers are being impacted by different things. And we like to do this by doing any kind of research, just so that we can provide a better level of support and care to you guys. So with that in mind, please help us by filling in an anxiety survey that we have started from today. We would really appreciate all your insights, your experiences, and also feel free to please share this with your organization, with your leaders, with your staff, with whoever. Help us help you. This is one of the ways in which we try and gather as much information as we can with whatever may be influencing any person in NPO. So we will also post that link in the chat box as well. And then also, for those who don't know, NPOwer have launched a support group, a monthly support group. The next support group, it's the second meeting. It was an awesome experience. The second support group meeting is on the 10th of September at 12 o'clock. Please keep an eye on the social media pages of NPOwer. Please join us if you guys are wanting or needing a safe space just to share your experiences of like-minded people in the NPO sector. Please come and join us. I'm going to just share our social media pages. We have so many helpful resources that are on there, shared on there every single day. And we would love for you guys just to go and have a look at all of our resources and just join us on social media. So on that note, thank you so much for everyone who joined us today. We so appreciate it. We hope that you enjoyed the session and that you had some time for yourselves and just to take in. The recording for this will be sent with either tomorrow or on Monday, with some resources as well. And if you are needing anything from us, there's an email address on the website, just reach out to us. Again, call the number 0800 515 515. Let's together we can all support each other. And we hope that you guys have a fantastic weekend, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.